All right, so we are live. I'm going to be doing a necessary being survey. Um, it's by, I think the survey was created by Josh Rasmussen, and it was recently done by K and B. But so I figured I might as well do it too. Um, I already did this survey a little while ago, um, but why not do it on my channel? Why not? You'll be asked a series of questions about very basic manners. Those answers will then be analyzed to see if any of them imply that there exists a necessary being. Necessary being is anything that necessarily exists and can cause something else to exist or occur. Here are some comments and instructions before you begin. Definition of key terms will be highlighted in blue. Roll over them with your mouse pointer for a definition. You may click here for an elaboration of the meaning of the most critical term, necessary being. The terms can and possible will be used interchangeably to consistently mean does not contradict anything that is necessary. And some answers will be automatically tracked. Good luck. Is there a necessary being? I lean towards no. I don't think that there can be a concrete being that's necessary. I think the only kind of necessary beings plausibly are abstracta. Um, and I guess the main reasons are I don't think the arguments for the existence of a concrete necessary being are convincing. That is, I don't really buy arguments from the PSR, related arguments like that. I don't think any version of the PSR, which is such that you can motivate arguments to the existence of a necessary being. I'm not convinced by any of PSRs of that sort. But even like more than that, I have a hard time understanding like what it would even be for a concrete being to be necessary. Like in virtue of what could be the case that some concrete being cannot fail to exist. Like it doesn't seem like it can be the case that it cannot fail to exist in virtue of its denial being logically impossible. I mean, because if that were the case, then the existence of a necessary concreta would be an entailment from the theorems of logic, but that just seems to be clearly false. Doesn't seem like it can be true in virtue of propositional content, or necessarily true in virtue of propositional content or logical relations, because it's not a property or proposition either. And it doesn't seem like it can be analytically true that there exists a necessary being, because it seems that no matter how you define the concept of necessary being, it seems that it can be possible to deny the concept, right? It could be possible to deny the concept exists, that is, that there is any such thing that answers to the concept. So I don't think you can derive the existence of a necessary being out of a mere definition, right? Like a bachelor is an unmarried man. And I have a hard time seeing how it could be synthetically true too. It seems like you'd have to say that its nature is such that it cannot fail to exist, or that it must exist and that it cannot fail to exist, right? Um, but like, I have a hard time like parsing how that would even be cashed out, right? Like, it seems you would need to bring in some sort of first order property account of existence in the first place. That's one thing. Like, in order to say that something has a nature which is such that it can't fail to exist, it seems like you need to uh, attribute existence to it as some sort of like first order property, and that already looks kind of suspect to me. Um, so I don't know. It just seems like a puzzle to me. Like I basically what I'm saying here is that I don't think and I don't understand what it would even be for a concrete being to like be necessary. I just have a hard time parsing that. I think there's a puzzle here. Um, so I guess overall I would say it seems not. Can anything be entirely inside of itself? I don't exactly know what the inside of relation entails. Uh, I yeah, I just don't know. I can't say. Can there be a contingent thing that has no cause? So it's basically asking if there could be root contingencies, and like my immediate reaction is just yeah, why not? I don't see a problem with root contingencies at all. I don't think there's anything absurd about that at all. Yeah, I don't see the problem with that. So I don't find it absurd or unintuitive. I don't get the intuition that there being root contingencies is like completely absurd. I've never had that intuition, uh, sorry, what I mean to say is that it seems so. Yeah, that definitely seems possible to me. Can a possible event be uncausable? Um, I mean, sure. Like, I don't see why not. Again, like events, in our event horizon, events that we're acquainted with in the world of experience, um, those tend to be events that can be caused. Those seem like the kind of events we're used to seem to be causable events, but um, like I'm such an epistemically limited agent that I don't think I can access even all the types of events in the actual world and the modal properties they have, because whether it is causable or uncausable is a modal property, right, is to say that it can be caused in some possible world, or there is no possible world where it can be caused, right? So um, even in the actual world, I'm not sure if there are some events beyond my cognitive wheelhouse which have modal properties that are such that they're uncausable, right? I don't really have access to that, let alone do I have access to the total modal space, like when we're not even talking about just the actual world, we're talking about all like possible ways the world could have been. Could there be an event in one of those worlds that is such that it couldn't, its modal properties are such that there's no possible world where it's caused, right? It seems to me that that's eminently plausible. Like I have no way of ruling that out. Even if even if it wasn't possible, I have no idea how I could possibly know that. So, yeah, like I'm gonna say it seems so. Is it possible that there's anything that has a cause? I think there are actual events that have causes. So yeah, I would say sure. Yeah. Let P be any property which can, one, begin to be exemplified, and two, have instances that have a cause. Is it thereby possible for there to be something that causes P to begin to be exemplified by causing a first instance of it? For example, redness is a property that began to be exemplified, and it can have instances that have a cause, because there can be things that have, that have been caused to exist. So an event that caused the first red things would thereby cause redness to begin to be exemplified. Now, it seems to me that redness is the kind of property that can be caused to begin to that can be caused to begin to be exemplified. But I guess I'm in such. I guess, like as with the previous question, I'm in such an epistemically limited situation that I can't really say something about like the modal properties of what any property P would be. Right? It could be that there's a property P. I don't know what such a property would be, but it could be that there's such a property that is such that it meets the conditions that it can begin to be exemplified and have instances that have a cause. Yet, in itself, its first sort of instance, or whatever you want to say, is such that it's uncausable. Right? There could be a property like that. I have no idea. Right? I'm in such a limited circumstance, a limited epistemic circumstance, that I don't think that there's any possible way I could know that. So. Again, I'm just going to say I can't say here. Like I like intuitively, for the case of redness, it seems to be the case that it can begin to be exemplified, but I don't know if it's going to be the case for every single property P that you can think of that it's the case that it can begin to be exemplified. I think, yeah, I don't think there's any way of like really knowing that, so I can't say. Is it necessary that if there are contingent situations that obtain, that at least one of them is impossible to cause? So this is a bit of a tricky one, but I think if you for this question, if you switch the modal operators and quantifiers around, you'll actually notice that this is logically equivalent to asking that if it's possible that if there are contingent states of affairs, it is possible that all contingent states of affairs are possibly caused, which would just be to say there's a possible world where all contingent states of affairs are caused. But I just reject that it's possible that all contingent states of affairs have a cause, because keep in mind we're talking about metaphysical possibility here, as in this is a way the world actually could have been, right? So we're talking about metaphysical possibility. The world actually could have been such that it contains contingent that there are contingent situations, and at least one of them are impossible to cause, right? We're not talking about like a mere epistemic possibility, which is just this is how the world could be for all we know, which I would be happy to grant. So the premise, if insofar as it's talking about metaphysical possibility, isn't actually as modest as it would seem to be. And when you think about it, for there to be a possible world where all contingent states of affairs have a cause, this would entail that the state of affairs of the obtaining of all contingent facts in that world, or contingent states of affairs in that world, um, has a cause, right? So the state of affairs that is such that it includes the obtaining of all states of affairs in that world. So we can call that world W, and um, yeah, so all states of affairs obtaining, like there's a contingent states of affairs of all contingent states of affairs obtaining in W. And since it's a contingent state of affairs, if we were to accept this premise, since it's not impossible to cause, it would possibly have a cause, and meaning there's a possible world where it has a cause. So we're looking at the possible world where it would have a cause. Man, this stuff is like really hard to explain. But yeah, like, let me think for a second. Yeah, so, in the possible world where the conjunction of the state of affairs of all contingent states of affairs has a cause, in that possible world where that conjunction has a cause, that cause would have to be necessary, right? Because it couldn't be contingent, because ex hypothesi, all contingent states of affairs are included in the conjunction, right? It even includes itself. So, in that possible world, for there to be a cause of that state of affairs, it would have to be a necessary cause. So a necessary cause would exist in that world, a metaphysically necessary being. But if a necessary being exists in one possible world, it exists in all possible worlds. So basically you'd have a necessary being that exists, right? Because if it exists in one possible world, it exists in all possible worlds. So yeah, you have to be like really careful with this moral trickery that often comes up in these kind of discussions, especially around the existence of God. So I guess my answer is going to have to be that it seems not. Oh, sorry. I think what I meant to say is it seems so. Yeah, there has to be some event that it seems so. So it seems so. Is it possible that any and every contingent thing that might happen to exist has a cause? I take this to be basically equivalent to the last question, so I'm going to say seems not. It's like, yeah, it's kind of like the other question reversed, so yeah, I'd have to say it seems not. Suppose there can be a cause of a situation of there being at least n contingent instances of a certain type T for some n greater than 2, would it thereby be possible for there to be something that causes the situation of there being n minus 1 contingent instances of that same type? For example, a factory could cause there to be at least 100 cube blocks, so possibly a factory or something else could cause there to be at least 99 cube blocks. So for this question, I can't say. I would say that I can't say because, again, and I know I keep repeating myself here, I am a very epistemically limited agent, right? For the cube case or the block case, it seems intuitive that if there's a factory that can cause 100 blocks to exist, there can be a factory that causes 99 cubes to exist. But I'm far from confident this would be the case for any contingent object or event you could possibly come up with, especially when we take into consideration the antecedent conditions or laws of nature that had to exist to bring about the objects. So for all I know, there could be some certain set of laws of nature and antecedent conditions that are such that they are necessary for bringing about some object T, and entails bringing about exactly 100, no less of T. So yeah, like for all I know, that could be a possibility, right? So I guess what I'd have to say is that I can't say, right? Again, limiting improperty is one that entails a deficiency of some kind, such as a lack of power. All right, that's just a definition of limiting property. Is the property of being a powerful necessary being limiting? Yeah, I'd say so, to some extent. A necessary being can't commit suicide, right? They can't bring about the state of affairs wherein they don't exist. That seems to be, clearly a limit in some sense. And in general, I don't really have the intuition that an all-powerful contingent being is, more limited than an all-powerful necessary being. I'm not sure I really understand that intuition, so I would say, yeah, it seems so. It seems it is limiting to some extent. All right, some properties cannot have instances. For example, there cannot be instances of a square circle. Such properties trivially entail every property because statements of the form, if something has P, then it has Q, are vacuously true if nothing has P. Let's say a property P non-trivially entails property Q if P entails Q independently of whether P can or cannot have instances. In other words, P entails Q, but not merely because P cannot have instances. For example, being a square circle may seem to non-trivially entail having a shape. Sorry. By contrast, being a square circle does not seem to non-trivially entail being an octopus, for if there were square circles, plausibly none would be an octopus. Alright, so this is the distinction between trivial entailment and non-trivial entailment. Suppose being concrete entails P. Does being concrete necessary non-trivially entail being concrete and also P? Seems I would have to say yes, because by the definition of non-trivial entailment, being concrete would entail being concrete. So, trivially, yes, it would non-trivially entail being concrete and also P. So yeah, it seems so. Does being concrete and necessary non-trivially entail being contingent? Well, it seems when you think about it, it clearly trivially entails being contingent, since being concrete and necessary is impossible on my view, right? Since I don't think that there is a concrete necessary being, which means that there is no concrete necessary being in any possible world, since if there was one in a possible world, then it would be in all possible worlds, yada yada yada. So, yeah, I think being concrete and necessary is impossible on my view, so it entails everything, right? Because as stated before in the previous a couple slides ago, or a couple questions ago, trivial entailment, such as there being a square circle, trivially entails everything, right? So if it's impossible, it entails everything. Since I think being concrete and necessary is impossible, it entails everything, and that's how it works in classical logic, at least. But to answer the question, it's asking if being concrete and necessary non-trivially entails being contingent. Yeah, I would say that it non-trivially entails being contingent, because being concrete entails being contingent. Since I think it's impossible for there to be a being that's concrete and necessary, it follows that I think that all concrete beings in every possible world is contingent, right? I think, in every possible world, every concrete being is contingent. So that's just another way of restating that I think that there is no concrete necessary being, right? So, yeah, being concrete non-trivially entails being contingent on its own, which means being concrete and necessary non-trivially entails being contingent. So yeah, it seems so. As a rule of thumb, do contingent things generally, as a rule of thumb, do contingent things generally have a cause? Yeah, I would agree with that. In the world we are acquainted with, or what Kant would call the phenomenal world as opposed to the noumenal world, events generally have causes. We don't really encounter events with no explanation at all. So as a rule of thumb, I think it's generally useful to treat events as if they have, or contingent events, as if they do have causes. Yeah, I'd say so. Is it necessary that every concrete thing is included in a chain of causes that is both infinite and ungrounded? This is a really I'm not entirely sure. Okay, so ungrounded is a bit ambiguous here. Let's see if I can. Yeah, I don't know. I can't really. I thought you could. I guess not. But yeah, ungrounded is a bit ambiguous here. Does what does he mean by ungrounded? Does he mean by grounded, ungrounded, as in it's grounded, or it's not grounded by anything outside of the causal chain in question? In that case, I think all causal chains are probably ungrounded, since they would be explained by the first member of the chain, or the content of the chain, which contains causes for each of the conjuncts. But I guess my immediate reaction to this question is to say no, I guess, because it seems possible that there are more than one infinite and ungrounded chains of causes, and it seems possible that there are finite, chains of causes. But I guess I'm not sure as well. Like, I'm pretty agnostic on this, but I guess we can go with no. I don't know. Really confusing question. Suppose X and Y are any situations that are individually possible. That is, each is logically consistent with whatever is necessary. If X were actual, would Y remain individually possible? For example, assume unicorns and Pegasi are both possible. Then if unicorns become actual, would Pegasi remain possible? Note, I am not asking if X and Y are jointly possible. For example, a three-sided figure is possible, even if there happen to be no three-sided figures. So yeah, if it's not asking if they're jointly possible, that is, I don't see. Yeah. So if X were actual, would Y remain individually possible? Yeah, I think so. That seems to be the case. Yeah. Yeah. Like, we're not talking about joint possibility. We're just talking about if X were actual, would Y remain? So if unicorns are possible, for example, would Y remain like Pegasi remain individually possible? Yeah, it seems like you can pretty much substitute X and Y for anything, and this will turn out to be true as long as we're not talking about joint possibility. Yeah, that seems to be the case. Congratulations, your answers have an interesting implication. They appear to imply you have a prima facie reason to think that there is, more likely than not, a necessary being. Here's how. Okay. It is not necessary that every concrete thing is included in a chain of causes that is both infinite and ungrounded by your report. Right, I did report that, but I'm pretty agnostic on that. I don't really take that with any confidence at all. So I don't know. So it is possible for there to be a complete chain of causes that is either finite or infinite and grounded. Now, every chain of causes is part of a complete chain, but no complete chain of causes is grounded by definition of complete. Therefore, every chain of causes is part of a complete and ungrounded chain, such as a chain of all causes. It follows that it is possible for there to be a complete chain of causes that is finite, since no complete chain is grounded. Therefore, it is possible for there to be a contingent thing, C, that is among the first contingent things in a finite complete chain of causes. I'm assuming for the sake of argument that necessarily every concrete thing is contingent. If you drop this assumption, then you may proceed to the argument below for the existence of a necessary being from its possible existence. Now, as a rule of thumb, contingent things generally have a cause, or are more likely than not to have a cause, by a report. Therefore, you have a prima facie reason to think that C would have a cause. But since C is among the first contingent things, the only thing that could cause it is something that is not contingent. So if C has a cause, then its cause is a necessary being. Therefore, it appears that you have a prima facie reason to think it is possible for there to be something that would be caused by a necessary being. Yeah, I don't think this argument is convincing at all. I think the fact that C is among the first contingent things would just be a defeater for the rule of thumb, right? Rules of thumb don't apply for, things that we know are exceptional, right? If I knew that C was the first member of a complete chain of causes, my prima facie reason for thinking it has a cause would have a defeater, right? Like, I take it that it's being the first cause, the first member of the chain, means I have a reason to think that it doesn't have a cause, right? So this just seems like a bad argument. Even if I thought this argument was at all convincing, it doesn't seem like it overrides the kind of reasons I laid out for why I don't believe in a necessary being, why I reject the existence of a necessary being, or lean towards there not being one. So, yeah, I really don't find this argument convincing. But let's say I go back and say I can't say. Then that gets me out of this. None of your reports seem to imply that there is a necessary being. Not considering your report of whether there is not a necessary being. So if I say I can't say on this, this question, which I was pretty much agnostic on anyways, then I escape the dilemma anyways. I escape the argument for there being any necessary being. So, yeah, I suppose that's all there is to say. This is my taking the quiz, the necessary being quiz. That is all for today. Goodbye, YouTube.